The Washington Commanders have a brand new offensive tackle to go with their other brand new offensive tackle. The offseason of Jaden continuing in the first round of the NFL draft and right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I'm your host, David Harrison, here with you every Monday through Friday. Also your friend, your eyes, your ears on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA9.com, also for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. I want to thank you for coming through here for this live episode of Locked On Commanders from Ashburn, Virginia, the Washington Commanders headquarters. When I tell you I'm on ground, your eyes, your ears, covering the team, I mean it. So when there's something to be done here, we are here and you are here with me. I want to thank you for coming through again. Every dayers, those of you who come through every single day, thank you for coming through again today when we're talking about first round draft pick Josh Conerly Jr., offensive tackle out of the Oregon Ducks program. Anybody out there, if you're not already subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening right now, please do so at this moment. If you're new to the show, thanks for giving us a try. Thanks for finding us. Hopefully you like what you hear, what you see, and you come back again soon. Locked On Commanders is a daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. So the Washington Commanders' first round of the NFL draft is in the books. 2025 NFL draft. First round done, complete. It's 2:05 in the morning Eastern time here in Ashburn, Virginia, while we're recording this episode or broadcasting this episode, I should say. Fortunately for you, if you're asleep, you can catch this whenever you want to. But what we're going to talk about here is the 29th overall pick. The closer we got to the 29th overall pick, the Washington Commanders' first selection in the 2025 NFL draft, the more the media room basically was sitting there buzzing saying, it's got to be a trade. There's got to be a trade coming. There's got to be a trade offer. You look at the way the board is falling, and this is kind of a scenario we talked about heading into draft weekend, is a scenario where there's 5, 6, 7 really good players, but none of them are necessarily great, right? No what you would call blue chip players that just kind of slid down the board to you in your lap that you just had to have. Now, I did say that personally, me, myself, and I, Edge Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College would be my kind of, not going to call him a blue chip player, right? But certainly one of the top players in the NFL draft this year. He would have been the guy that for me, I probably would have said, okay, let's stick at 29 and let's pick him. Adam Peters and his staff, with loads and loads more research done on all these players than I can do by my lonesome, decided that Josh Conerly Jr. was one of those players. And in fact, the top player of those players on his board. So he went ahead, stuck at 29, did not make a trade. And so now the Washington Commanders have added left tackle Laramie Tunsil to the roster this offseason via a trade with the Houston Texans. And here on the first night of the NFL draft, they've added offensive lineman, I'm going to put it that way, Josh Conerly Jr., coming from the Oregon Ducks program. So who is Josh Conerly Jr.? 6'5", 311-pound offensive lineman, had a late first, early second round projection. So this area of the NFL draft is pretty much where everybody expected him to come off the board. We never, ironically, lovingly enough, got to our offensive tackle big board. We did all kinds of big boards for position groups, never got to the offensive tackle. I ran out of time. That's on me. I started it too late in the draft process. Lesson learned for next year. I'll start it earlier. And I had an eerie feeling during Thursday, during the day. I remember saying to myself, I was like, man, wanted to do linebacker, really wanted to do offensive tackle. And I was like, man, that offensive tackle big board, that's going to be the one that bites me in the butt. Sure enough, here we are, offensive tackle off the board. The good thing I can tell you is that I already started to prep that episode. So I already had started doing a little bit of research, wasn't able to finish it before we got here to draft day. And Josh Conerly was going to be near the top, if not at the top. I didn't get far enough to tell you he would have been at the top. Certainly would have been one of our top tackles. So that's the good news there. Why? Because he fits what the Washington Commanders are trying to do, what the Washington Commanders started to do last year under Adam Peters, under head coach Dan Quinn, right? Athletic offensive lineman. And that's really kind of one of the things as they brought guys in. Tyler Biotish, instinctful, intelligent, but also has that athleticism to get to the second level. Nick Allegretti, kind of like a Tasmanian devil energy to him, gets that second level with a lot of force. Brandon Coleman, considered one of the most athletic offensive linemen in his class, certainly one of the most athletic offensive lineman that was projected to be an interior offensive lineman by a lot of people. We'll get to the whole thing here in a little bit. Sam Cosmi, retained by the team. And then you come out here and you look at a guy like Josh Conerly Jr. He just kind of fits that mold, able to move outside, able to move into the second level. He displays that football IQ, and he's position versatile. Now, at Oregon, he did play exclusively left tackle, but he's got some position versatility in his history. Adam Peters mentioned it in his post day one press conference that the versatility is something that the Washington Commanders really were attracted to about Josh Conerly. And to wrap it all up into a nice bow package of stats, 6th ranked athleticism score of all offensive tackles attending the NFL Scouting Combine this year, a 1.71 second 10-yard split in the 40-yard dash among linemen, the fastest 10-yard split of all offensive linemen that ran the 40 this year. So, when it comes to 40-yard dashes, you're not totally worried about your offensive lineman's total 40, but that 10-yard split, how they get upfield, how quickly they can get moving, that can be incredibly, incredibly important. So Josh Conerly fits all of those molds of what a Washington Commander is going to be. And that's what I promised you here on this episode is even if it wasn't the guy that I said I would take, even if it's not the guy that you said you would take or your favorite draft expert said they would take, I'm going to sit here and tell you why I think the Washington Commanders took this player and why it could potentially fit. Now, I'm also going to tell you the truth on whether or not I like the pick, dislike the pick. Here's what I'll say about it. I like the pick. I like Josh Conerly Jr. I like him as an offensive lineman. As a tackle prospect, I think he's got talent. I think he will potentially earn a starting job in his rookie season, and I think he's got a lot of upside to him. He's got to build up a little bit of strength in him. He's a little bit, I don't want to say he's soft. He's certainly not soft, right? But from an NFL offensive lineman standpoint, you do want a little bit more strength in him, a little bit better of an anchor in him. But those are things that can develop, things that can be taught, things that can kind of grow into him. However, I will tell you, just like some people out there, I thought the defense was enough of a priority that if you have, again, I'm going to go back to this, Donovan Ezeraku, you've got Josh Conerly Jr., both of them have very similar grades. I'm going to give that bump a little bit to the pass rusher because it's something that we don't really have on our roster right now, and we certainly can use or need to get. And so that's the direction I would have gone. So do I fully agree with the direction? No, that's okay, though. It doesn't mean I dislike the player, dislike the pick, or don't see the fit. I certainly see it in all levels. This is not Emmanuel Forbes where I'm going to sit here and tell you I would have taken this player because I don't see how this player fits. Now, here's why I think they think he fits, but I don't think he fits. Here's why I think Josh Conerly fits. Here's why Adam Peters says he fits. I'm telling you right now, I see the vision. I see the potential for him. Now, something that Adam Peters also mentioned in his post-day one press conference, really like the way that Josh Conerly competed against Ohio State twice last season, 2024 college football season, and Abdul Carter, the Penn State pass rusher that went number 3 overall to the New York Giants. So now the New York Giants have got the best pass rusher in the draft, and your new offensive tackle for the Washington Commanders has gone up against them and had a very solid performance. He had green grades, according to PFF, in both games against the Buckeyes, a very solid grade in the game against Penn State and against Oregon in 2024. And Josh Conerly Jr., not exclusively, but primarily, Abdul Carter had 0 sacks, 6 tackles, none for a loss. So he was not getting penetration. He was not making plays in the backfield. And because of it, Oregon won the game. They won the Big Ten title, and at the time became a favorite to potentially win or compete for the college football national championship. When asked whether or not he was expecting to land in Washington, Josh Conerly Jr. said, quote, "It's a God-given opportunity. Honestly, was I expecting it? Yeah, I was ready to go. It's a God-given opportunity," end quote. On blocking for Jaden Daniels, he said, "It means the world to me. Heisman Trophy winner, someone I looked up to. They both played in the same conference for a little bit. I'm looking forward to the opportunity just to get out there and block for one of the best," end quote. On playing the right side if needed. That's a big question here. He said, quote, "It's what I've got to do. It's what I've got to do," end quote. Only one press conference, Zoom. It's right after he got drafted. So not a lot of words there, not a lot of context there, but you'll love to hear what you're already hearing out of new Washington Commanders offensive tackle Josh Conerly Jr. Now, where does he fit and why not defense? That's coming up next on today's live episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it comes time to hire, you need a worker or a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in, because when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job for free, and LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Continuing now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders, following day one of the 2025 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders selecting Oregon offensive lineman Josh Conerly Jr. Next phase of this conversation, we talk about who Josh is, what his thoughts are about coming to the Washington Commanders. Now, let's get into where he fits and why Adam Peters says he did not go on the defensive side of the ball. So where does he fit? That's a little bit up in the air. However, you come here for opinions and or answers. Can't give you the answer because I can't look into the future. So I'm going to give you my opinion. Here is the current projection of the offensive line to me. Left tackle, Laramie Tunsil. Left guard, Nick Allegretti or Brandon Coleman. I think that's going to be the competition. Center is going to be Tyler Biotish. Your right guard competition is going to be Andrew Wiley and Trent Scott. Your right tackle is going to be Josh Conerly Jr. Now, could I see a scenario where Trent Scott maybe plays right guard as Sam Cosmi continues to mend? Trent Scott was the guard who filled in for Sam Cosmi when he first went down with the injury. I think he did a very splendid job. Yes, I could absolutely see that. Meanwhile, Andrew Wiley and Josh Conerly Jr. on the right side are doing what Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas, almost forgot his name for some reason, sorry, Corn, did last year, where they're rotating a little bit. They're both getting reps, both getting starter reps, both getting depth reps. Preseason comes along, regular season comes along. Look, if you're an everydayer going all the way back to that time of year last year, you might remember I wasn't a big fan of the rotating left tackle, but I have to admit, it actually worked out pretty well. So if they can make that happen and make it work again at the right tackle spot, you get Josh Conerly Jr. some very valuable reps, but you don't necessarily throw him to the wolves. You don't throw him in the deep end. You put him in for a little bit, you pull him out, you coach him up, you love him up, you put him back in there. Meanwhile, Andrew Wiley, the superb veteran, great teammate, great mentor, all those things, is going out there and doing what great teammates, great mentors always do. He's playing when he needs to play, coaching up when he needs to coach, being a good teammate across the board. I could definitely see a situation where that happens. Now, that just basically leaves Nick Allegretti and Brandon Coleman. I think Nick Allegretti is a very solid left guard. Again, love the energy that he comes with, love the intensity he plays with. Brandon Coleman, super athletic offensive lineman coming out of the 2024 NFL Draft. A lot of people projected him to be a guard in the National Football League. This could be the opportunity for him to kind of solidify himself in one of those positions. And now you're not having to worry necessarily about all the things that an offensive tackle has to, because Laramie Tunsil is out there doing that stuff for you. I think that'd be a really good competition. I can't sit here and tell you who I would predict to win that competition in this moment in time, but I think it'd be a very, very interesting, very solid camp battle to watch. And one way or another, you're either going to have a solid veteran backup in Nick Allegretti, or you're going to have a very solid young backup in Brandon Coleman, who's going to continue to grow behind the scenes as a backup, do all those things, and potentially come back in 2026 and compete for the exact same job. Or you'll have some other draft picks, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, you've got to fill in for Sam Cosmi, who's got experience and, again, has kind of proven himself. I wouldn't necessarily say that the potential of drafting another interior offensive lineman is off the table for the Washington Commanders, but they've also got some new guys that they brought in, Herbig and all those guys that certainly look like they could be contributors and maybe even challenge for spots. Haven't watched them to the point, don't know them to the point where I can sit here and tell you they're going to compete, but potentially could compete. So I think that's where Josh Conerly is going to fit. Now, AP did say they don't have a projection for him. Josh Conerly Jr. in his Zoom conference with us after he was selected also said they haven't said where I'm going to play, but that's where he kind of said, whatever I got to do is what I'm going to do. The only spot taken, according to Adam Peters, is that left tackle spot. He said LT is going to play LT. Laramie Tunsil is your left tackle. Other than that, everything's up for grabs. He even mentioned center, which I was a little bit surprised about, to be quite honest with you. I thought Tyler Biotish was a little bit more solidified than that, but he's kind of a little bit jokingly, right, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek said, hey, Josh Conerly could probably play center, and if that's where he's best for us, that's where it works. So why more offense? That's what some people, I say some people because by and large, from what I'm seeing, the reaction to the pick is highly positive. Even those who wanted defense or thought they should go defense are not necessarily down on the selection. They're just saying, yeah, I like the selection. I just would have gone this other way, kind of like how I was doing in the first segment. So why not go that way? Why go offensive line instead of defense, or why go offensive defense? Well, for starters, in pass blocking efficiency, right? A measurement that it measures how effective an offensive line is as a unit, as a whole for the duration of the season. The Commanders' offensive line overall was ninth last season, top 10. Very good. They were 11th best in sacks surrendered, so 11th fewest in the NFL in sacks surrendered. However, ninth most in pressures allowed. That's not good, right? That's never good. So what it tells you is what we basically already knew, which is that your athletic quarterback, as young as he is doing a lot of things to mask the deficiencies up front ahead of him on the offensive line. So that's why they continue to improve the offensive line when they get the opportunity. I, like most of you, thought interior alignment was probably going to be like the first priority. I think most of us kind of assumed Brandon Coleman was going to get the opportunity to play that right tackle position. And listen, according to Adam Peters, none of those positions are solidified. Josh Conerly Jr. can also kick inside. So potentially Brandon Coleman could still be your right tackle. But this move essentially does both, because if Josh Conerly gets beat out at right tackle, it's probably going to be by Andrew Wiley or Brandon Coleman. And so that leaves him to potentially move inside where he competes with Nick Allegretti, or he competes to be that right guard while Sam Cosmi's out. And now your interior offensive line is getting better. Either way, you've got one starter from last year becoming essentially a backup with the arrival of Laramie Tunsil. And now you've got either a first-round backup, which would be a little bit of a PR headache for a period of time, or you got a first-round pick coming in and pushing another player into the depth who used to be a starter last year, and now you've got even more experience in your depth. So either way, you're improving your offensive line, whether you selected an interior offensive lineman or you selected a tackle. Once Tyler Booker from Alabama came off the board to the Dallas Cowboys, and then Gray Zabel came off the board from North Dakota State. After that, I was kind of like, okay, those are kind of your interior offensive line that you would consider at 29. There's not really a lot of other ones. Donovan Jackson did end up coming off. Typically, he was coming off early second round. So I guess at 29, you could consider him as well. But other than those three guys, really, it was basically all tackles. If you're going offensive line there, that's where the Washington Commanders ended up going. So that's as far as why offense. Why not a trade back? That's another big conversation point here, another big place of opinions. AP did say that they had plenty of calls to trade back once 29 came on the clock. They've had calls all week, and they certainly had a lot of calls on Thursday night, but they decided to stay and pick, saying that Conerly was one of the players they had on their big board that they had marked down that they're not going to take a trade. Remember, I asked Adam Peters in his pre-draft press conference, try to get a number out of him, but basically said, do you have a list of players that you want at 29, and are there a subsection of that list of players where you're like, if these guys are available or one of these guys are available, we're not trading back, we're taking a player. He says that Conerly was one of those players, and he was the highest remaining player on their board with that distinction. So he acknowledged that the process of more offensive tackles coming off the board earlier in the draft than maybe expected, including Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, who I mocked to the Commanders only once because Conerly was gone. I had Conerly better or ranked higher than Kelvin Banks Jr. Personally. And then edge rushers were kind of sliding. So does the fact that offensive tackles are starting to come off the board, edge rushers are falling, have an impact on that decision? He said it does have an impact on the conversation, but it's not necessarily a driver of the decision. So that's kind of the short of it. Basically, Adam Peters put himself in position this offseason to go best player available. Josh Conerly Jr., offensive tackle out of Oregon, was the best player available, and a player that they had labeled do not trade back if he's on the board. Someone they didn't feel comfortable trading back for and trusting that he would still be there. And truthfully, they were probably correct, because in the 3 picks that came after theirs that presumably would probably have gone by in a trade back, another offensive tackle came off the board, Josh Simmons from Ohio State to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, personally, Josh Simmons, Josh Conerly Jr., kind of in the same realm, to be honest with you. But according to Adam Peters, they had Conerly Jr. on that list of we can't pass this guy up. That's the decision that they're going to go make. Cornerback Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky went to the Buffalo Bills. I know he's a guy that some Commanders fans have their eyes on. Linebacker Jahad Campbell from Alabama went to the Philadelphia Eagles, another guy that we talked about on this program as well. Speaking of the Eagles, given that they just added more pass rushing help, it might be a very good thing. Even if you don't love the pick, it might be a very good thing that the Washington Commanders continue to improve their offensive line. But that's not all. Our look at the first round and previewing the second round coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here as the NFL draft is entering one of the biggest parts of its schedule, its calendar. The NBA is certainly in the biggest part of its calendar as of right now. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel, you make your first $5 bet, you can get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. One of my favorite parts about FanDuel is how easy it is to make your selections, place your wagers, track the progress, collect your winnings when you have them, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props. Same game parlays are like my nectar. I don't know what to call it. It's guilty pleasure, I guess, except it's not guilty pleasure because I brag about it all the time. I love same game parlays. I love collecting those. And I love putting them together. They're a lot of fun. Or you can just go straight up. You can have wagers on games individually, but you can also bet on the entire series. Right now, the Los Angeles Lakers are minus 118 favorites to win their series over the Minnesota Timberwolves. Meanwhile, the Golden State Warriors minus 166 favorites to win their series over the Houston Rockets. The Los Angeles Clippers minus 400 to beat the Nuggets, and the Oklahoma City Thunder minus 100,000 to beat the Memphis Grizzlies. So those are some of your wagers there at FanDuel. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, wrapping up the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft. Again, offensive tackle Josh Conerly Jr. from the Oregon Ducks program is your new Washington Commanders first-round draft pick. So back-to-back years, first round goes to the offense. Of course, quarterback Jaden Daniels at number 2, and then 27 picks later, 1 year later, Josh Conerly at number 29. Now, let's look at the first round. Let's look at the day 2 as well. The first trade of the first round, kind of going over. We're not going to go pick by pick, but we're going to hit some of the highlights, right? First trade of the first round came at number 2. The Jaguars moving up with the Cleveland Browns to get Travis Hunter, wide receiver / cornerback. It was noticed that they did not announce a position for Travis Hunter when a bunch of pick swaps involved in that trade, and a 2026 first round from Jacksonville going to the Cleveland Browns in that deal. So the Jacksonville Jaguars now have Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Brian Thomas Jr. at receiver, and Travis Hunter at receiver / cornerback, you presume. The New York Giants at number 3 end up getting Abdul Carter, who will now join Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau on what was already a pretty solid defense. There is some speculation that the Giants may be looking to move Kayvon Thibodeau, so perhaps he's not going to be a part of that unit. But either way, the Giants' pass rush just got better. It was already pretty good to begin with. The Dallas Cowboys went offensive line with their first-round pick, which is not the super sexy pick. I think a lot of people thought they were going to go receiver, but it makes a lot of sense for the Cowboys to go O-line instead, and that's where they went. Tight end Tyler Warren out of Penn State ended up with the Indianapolis Colts, which I kind of laughed about because in our last mailbag episode before the draft, I addressed the too early Offensive Rookie of the Year projection, and I actually picked Tyler Warren in that mock draft we used, had gone to Indianapolis Colts, and I said if he goes to the Colts, I can see him winning that Offensive Rookie of the Year award for various reasons. So Tyler Warren is there. We will see at the end of the year if I was right in my too early Offensive Rookie of the Year projection. The first big twist, at least Commanders related, as far as I'm concerned, for the NFC East came when the New York Giants moved back up into the first round to pick 25th overall. We all thought it was going to be Shedeur. We all thought it was going to be Shedeur Sanders. It was like, oh, Shedeur Sanders coming to the NFC East. Instead, it's quarterback Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. The Atlanta Falcons also moved back into the first and ahead of the Washington Commanders. And when they did that, I thought they were taking an edge rusher. I thought they were taking Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. Instead, they go James Pierce Jr., perhaps trying to get ahead of the rush on edge rushers that never came. James Pierce Jr., the last edge rusher taken in the first round. That leads us into my top 5, my personal top 5 heading into day 2. Edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku was my number 1 guy, sitting at number 29, so he's still there. It makes sense that he's going to be there for my day 2 out of Boston College. Running back Travion Henderson out of Ohio State would be my number 2 target. Cornerback Trey Amos out of Ole Miss would be my 3rd. Safety Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina has fallen just a little bit. At one point, he was the first guy on my personal board of players that I would like to see the Commanders go after. Now he's 4th. Still like him. Just don't maybe like him as much as I used to. Wide receiver Jalen Knoll out of Iowa State is my 5th and final guy on that list. Not the only guys I like in day 2 of the NFL draft, but we're going to go with the top 5 here as we wrap up today's episode. We will be back at this tomorrow, day 2 of the NFL draft, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I will be on WSA 9 Plus on WSA9.com. You can find that with Chick Hernandez and Grant Paulson to do another pre-draft episode where we'll talk about position needs, talk about players, talk about surprises, talk about a lot of good stuff. So come through WUSA 9. You can get it anywhere, no matter whether you live in DC or not. Come join us for the early part of the second round as we preview everything to come on day 2. That is it for this. Next episode of Locked On Commanders, we'll be talking more about the NFL draft, of course. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, all you got to do is shoot me a text. To do that, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Not only are you going to text me, but I'm going to text you. You're going to get insight, information. I was texting insiders all throughout the night. It was a roller coaster ride for all of us. It was a lot of fun, but it was also a little bit weird. If you're a second listen, check out the Locked On NFL mock draft or check out any of the other Locked On NFL channels. Got all your teams, all your college teams covered. So go ahead and check those out wherever you're listening to this episode right now. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every dayers. Thanks for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, so I can see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.